Son Goku, Kakarot, the poster boy of not just anime martial artists, but probably shonen anime and anime as a whole. When it comes to combat knowledge, skill, and ability, very few characters can stand a chance against the greatest and sometimes most powerful martial artist in the entire Dragon Ball universe. Bruce Wayne, the Dark Knight, Batman, one of the most iconic superheroes and fictional characters of all time, period. In his universe, his martial arts prowess, knowledge, and vast resources are almost unmatched in their totality. But what would happen if these two martial arts masters from Eastern and Western storytelling were to fight? Who would win? In this video, I will be covering 3 separate versus matchups that I think serve as a pretty comprehensive summary of Batman versus Goku when comparing their abilities together. These 3 matchups are equal stats, random encounter, and with preparation. As there's a lot of stuff to cover, let's not waste any time and jump right in with discussing Goku versus Batman equal stats. Of course, if you're a fan of this kind of stuff, make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to follow my socials down below. Round 1. Equal stats. Firstly, by equal stats, I just mean that both Batman and Goku have identical physical abilities. They're just as fast, strong, and durable as each other, and all abilities they might have scale to that level proportional to their base strength. Think of it as that both of them have the same power level in this fight, either Goku being lowered to Batman's level or Batman being raised up to Goku's level. It doesn't really matter which. So let's begin with going over Goku's martial arts ability. How good at fighting is he actually? Now, there are potentially 2 different ways to look at Goku when it comes to equal stats. Either he starts in base, or he starts at whatever his current full power is at the time of the conversation, which at this point should be Mastered Ultra Instinct. For this video, we will be talking about the latter rather than the former. Why? Well, given how Goku can instantly pop into a form that suddenly makes him 50 times stronger and faster, it kind of defeats the purpose of equal stats if the first thing that Goku does is use something that makes it so the stats are no longer equal. But if you want to say Goku can instantly transform in an equal stats fight and blitz any person he's fighting by hundreds or thousands of times over, be my guest. But I won't be talking about that here. So, let's begin with Goku. When it comes to actually measuring Goku's martial arts ability, most of the information we have actually comes from the original Dragon Ball series, as notoriously, the concept of actual good martial arts abilities determining your ability to fight pretty quickly fell away to the strength of your battle power and your key manipulation ability, rather than your outright combat skill. Still, even in OG Dragon Ball, we are told pretty explicitly the level of martial arts that most characters are fighting at. Both Master Roshi and Grandpa Gohan are implied to pretty much be masters and the best at literally every martial art in the world. For Roshi, it's called into question if he doesn't know any martial art, which means likely that he knows all, if not most of them. Now, knowing is pretty different from actually mastering a martial art. However, Grandpa Gohan's statement is even better than Roshi's, with Yamcha saying Gohan is well known for the fact that in literally all martial arts, Gohan is a master that is unsurpassed by anyone. While we don't know how many martial arts exist within the Dragon Ball world, if it's any analog to our real world, this would mean Roshi and Gohan would know approximately 180 different styles, and either know or have mastered every single one of them. Now, many of these styles do include weapons that they don't use or Goku doesn't use in a standard fight, but even ignoring these styles, the list is substantially higher than 100 different martial arts. However, from various statements, the level of martial arts possible in the Dragon Ball world might be far higher than that of the real world. In his fight with the Wolfman, who Roshi defeats with literally 0 difficulty, they explain that they are a 30 Dan in Kempo. This is impressive as real-world martial arts usually only go up to 9th or 10th Dan, meaning Wolfman unironically surpassed the masters of real-world martial arts 20 times over and still got no diff, and by default would be below Roshi and Grandpa Gohan in martial arts mastery. This applies to Goku, as guides like El Manga Legendario explain that Goku's abilities were on par par with Grandpa Gohan, which should include martial arts, ability, and skill. This is insanely impressive given how this is Kid Goku well before he matures as a fighter and goes through some of the most serious training of his life, having not even had his first real death match until his fight with King Piccolo. Goku surpassing Roshi and Gohan in skill is further supported with statements in Dragon Ball Z consistently calling adult Goku the greatest martial artist the world has ever known, which by definition puts him over anyone else in the story we know about. So likely at bare minimum, Goku is a master of pretty much every martial art to exist, which numbers well into the hundreds, potentially at the level of surpassing real-world fighters by 20 levels of mastery. However, admittedly, this is somewhat extrapolating off of the instance of Kenpo. For all we know, only Kenpo is different in Dragon Ball Z, and everything else isn't the same. Now, for things to get really crazy, using some guides for movies and anime, knowing and mastering every martial art on Earth becomes a baseline for super weak characters like Videl, who are stated to have mastered martial arts as a whole. And I don't think I need to tell you that Goku is miles beyond Videl's level. Still, this isn't the limit to Goku's potential as a combatant. Just knowing martial arts is one thing, actually using them and being a skilled fighter is another thing entirely. For example, you could be a skilled driver, but not necessarily an actual good racer. Firstly, Goku very early on has showed the capacity to both copy techniques he's seen only once, as well as create his own techniques on the fly, though usually this applies to key manipulation abilities rather than pure martial arts skill. Furthermore, the martial arts Goku created by himself were just acting feral, but Roshi still really had no counter against it regardless, at least when it came to normal martial arts. Beyond this, Roshi's analytical ability is immensely impressive. Even before the start of Dragon Ball Z, Goku could predict what his opponents were doing through intuition, instinct, and feeling air currents, even when having his back turned to them. This was further increased with better ki sensing, which allows him to outright sense opponents' intention behind attacks and predict attacks from characters like Hit, whose movements were happening entirely in frozen time. Even in early Dragon Ball, Goku seems capable of almost downloading his opponent's moves, essentially knowing any attack they could potentially throw after seeing them only a couple times. By the time of Super, Goku's able to, by his own words, become immune to an entire pressure point technique after being hit by it essentially one time. However, this still isn't the peak of Goku's abilities, as his martial arts techniques have now stepped into the domain of the gods. Ultra Instinct. Firstly, there is a major misconception about Ultra Instinct that I first like to discuss. It is not just an automatic dodge ability. All Ultra Instinct does is allow the user to fight without thinking, something that usually manifests in them being able to dodge their opponent's attacks with minimum effort and maximum efficiency. However, as we've seen, Ultra Instinct can still get hit and even sometimes allows itself to get hit, either because attacks are essentially impossible to dodge, like with Moro or Frieza, or the perceived optimal action is not dodging, like we see with Moro. Still, this is essentially an extension of the previous fighting senses we went over, but cuts out Goku's necessity to actually perceive his opponents through his other senses in the first place. With this section being equal stats, we don't actually need to worry about Goku's stamina issues with MUI, as his stamina would just be equivalent to that of Batman in this instance. Now, that's just Goku's fighting experience and martial arts abilities. He also has a wide array of abilities granted to him through ki techniques. Most importantly is flight and the capacity to shoot out offensive ki attacks. These attacks are capable of blasting things they hit to atoms if they can overcome their durability. These attacks, like the Kamehameha, often add some sort of multiplicative stat amp to Goku's abilities, but do require some sort of preparation to get them off. Goku also has teleportation with instant transmission, and can of course use it in tandem with the Kamehameha to pull off an insanely deadly instant transmission Kamehameha, which completely blew up the upper half of Cell. Besides these, I don't think many of Goku's other ki attacks are super relevant to what he can do in an equal stats setting, but I hope I've established that even ignoring his universe-busting power, Goku is an absolute monster in hand-to-hand combat. Now, moving on to Batman. Firstly, we do somewhat need to establish which version of Batman we're talking about. After all, Batman is one of the single longest running characters continuously getting new fictional stories. However, very recently, all Batman scaling and canonicity issues have somewhat been made irrelevant. Let me explain. You see, At the conclusion of the event Dark Knight's Death Metal, the entire DC multiverse went through another one of its many reboots. This reboot was different from all the others though, as it let the current characters keep their memories of pretty much all past versions of themselves across the multiverse and entire history of DC Comics. Now, while this is not as impactful for someone like, say, Superman, for Batman, it means he now has all the martial arts training, experiences, and abilities of all previous mainline Batman, meaning dividing between post-crisis, pre-crisis, or New 52 doesn't really matter, which makes everyone's life easier. But it also makes it so there's a lot more Batman history to go through, which just makes it more likely that I'm probably going to miss something, so don't get on my ass if I missed a random issue from like 1972, okay? Either way, let's jump right in. At baseline, guides time and time again tell us that Batman has mastered every single martial art in the world of DC, which numbers at over 120 different styles. Beyond this, Bruce fights in such a unique way in which he both copies other people's unique fighting styles, not attributed to any one of the named styles, switches between the known styles, and even uses multiple styles in single strikes. That his specific way of fighting is unique, unlike anything else in the DC universe. Now, while the hierarchy is always changing, there are always a handful of characters that are considered better than him or are also on that tier. For example, even normal MMA fighters in the world of DC are also capable of mastering every martial art on Earth and still lose to Batman without any gear. This is also supported by the fact that outside observers consider him not only a master of every single martial art, but that his mastery is on an unheard of level. Among these hundreds of styles and thousands of techniques, his mastery includes the verbatim most deadly martial arts techniques and attacks, which are ones that don't exist in the real world, at least from my research. In some instances, Bruce has invented entire new styles of martial arts in order to defeat the Batman Who Laughs, as their skills were essentially equal, so he needed to get an upper hand. Of course, beyond just basic martial arts knowledge and quantity, he is an absolute combat prodigy, as Bruce has stated multiple times to know his opponent's attacks before they can even react to them themselves, to the point where he can download the skills of his opponent, add them to his repertoire, and then counter them all in his opponent's first attack. However, Batman's natural capacity to fight and adapt his opponents goes even beyond this level. Regardless of how many senses are available to him, Batman is able to fight and react to opponents. He can use nothing but air currents to react to his opponents, or simply fight on pure instinct to dodge attacks he has no idea were coming at him. In particular, I have to mention Batman's knowledge on pressure points and how to attack the opponent's nerves directly. There are numerous instances of Batman one-shotting people with a single finger, making them lose control of their body by cutting them with a single batarang, and even staggering way stronger characters with a surprise attack to weak points. He's also trained himself to literally trick his brain to not feel pain at all, cutting himself with a knife and not feeling it. Of course, there is also a laundry list of hundreds of other skills that Batman has, like weapon knowledge, his general scientific knowledge, detective skills, engineering, and tech knowledge. The list goes on, but what I've listed, I hope gives an overview of just his raw combat ability and knowledge. Now, aside from martial arts, it's also a bit difficult to establish what Batman's, quote, base arsenal looks like at any time, as it often changes between stories and even chapters. He's got batarangs of all kind, knockout gas, restraining foam, bolas, flashbangs, sonic gear, tasers, lasers, and in like literally a billion different things depending on the story. To summarize all of it, he has a lot of ways to take people out as quickly and efficiently as possible. With all this in mind, who wins this round? Now, I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression. This match is extremely close, and I really hope I've shown I don't have a mega bias towards one side. However, if I have to give it to one of them, I'm giving it to Bruce. Now, when it comes to a lot of their martial arts statements and feats, they have a lot of things in common. Both have created their own martial art, both can read their opponent's moves, both can fight without thinking, both can copy moves they've seen, and both have mastered, quote, every martial art. But when you start breaking it down and looking closer, Batman really truly has an edge in this. Just for starters, Batman naturally does what Goku's strongest godly form needed to teach him. While Goku probably knows every martial art to an unnatural degree, we know for certain that Bruce does, and he's able to mix them so well it's become a completely new fighting style. Goku just doesn't have statements on that level, and we really don't know what martial arts he's using at any given time. For all we know, he can use a bunch, but just uses Kung Fu or something, or only uses them one at a time. Now, something like ki attacks are mighty strong, but in an equal stats setting, they'd be just as helpful as the dozen different types of bombs, restraining tools, and gadgets that Batman has. Now, a lot of people like to point out that Goku apparently has, quote, more experience because he fought all of these ancient beings, and King Kai's training was equivalent to 1,000 years of training. However, quantity by no means means quality. By that logic, Kid Buu would have more martial arts skill than Perfect Cell, just because he's been around longer. Goku really doesn't have much experience fighting people that are on his skill level. The only real characters who have arguably rivaled him in the era are Cell and maybe current Vegeta in Super. Meanwhile, Batman fights people with similar or higher levels of skill all the time, and pretty consistently matches or beats them outright. Goku just doesn't have feats like that. I also mentioned pressure points because I knew someone would, but all Goku did to overcome pressure points was just moving his vital spots out of the way of Granola's attack. Batman could easily hit another pressure point somewhere else, and Goku does not have much or any experience using pressure points himself. So, equal stats, Goku loses. Hello, so this is a post-editing wonk here. I just wanted to add just a little bit more on the win cons for both of them, because I don't think I went into detail for that enough. I wanted to make it clear that both of them absolutely have win cons over each other. I didn't want to make it seem like Goku always loses and that Batman always wins, but I think like out of 10 matches, Batman is going to be winning more than half of them, if that makes sense. While Goku has things like maybe using Hakai, even though he never does that in character, or like the teleport Kamehameha, which he rarely uses, aside from things like those, like really strong sudden surprise attacks that like hit really, really hard, I just think Batman just has more wing conditions like that. Knockout gas, pressure point forcing Goku to breathe in, cutting one of his arteries so he can't move his body anymore. Batman's whole thing is having takedowns for people, and so he just naturally has more of those, and those become only stronger in a equal stats setting. So, just wanted to make that clear. This is not a 0-10 situation. Alright, back to the video. But there's still 1.5 rounds left. Not equal stats and prep. Surprising no one, in a random encounter, Batman stands no chance. Take the relatively close level of martial arts and put someone who's peak human against someone whose punches are going to destroy the universe. Now, of course, there are the handful of times where Batman does something where he could scale to multiversal or universal, but most of the time, this is just not the case, so obviously, Batman loses. But there is the concept of Batman's prep. Now, this idea has certainly been overblown by a lot of people. He can't just make a instant win button. There have been many times where Batman's prep has failed, was overcome, or to some degree backfired. So based on the technology that's been shown that Batman can get in a normal situation to take down someone above his level, what would he do to beat Goku? And would it work? Now, there are the initial obvious routes of whipping out his strongest mech suit like the Hellbat and straight up just battling Goku. Now, if you think the Hellbat is like a higher dimensional concept and stronger than Goku because it was able to fight Darkseid, then yeah, Batman can just win in a pure fight if he has his Hellbat suit. However, I think the most likely way that Batman could take out Goku is using the same technology he used to be another warrior superhuman. One of the most iconic Batman prep stories of all time is the Tower of Babel storyline, in which Batman's contingency plans are used by Ra's al Ghul to defeat the members of the Justice League. Of these, the one used to defeat Wonder Woman could probably also work on Goku. In the story, a nanite gets in her brain that convinces her she's fighting an equal opponent that can never be beaten. Essentially, it makes her fight until she straight up dies from exhaustion. And honestly, I see no reason why this wouldn't work on Goku. He's equally in character to put everything on the line to fight a strong enemy opponent, and becomes insanely weak with fatigue. I don't think his sensory skills would be good enough to detect a nanite, given how he has trouble perceiving micro-sized, small, fast-moving characters before. Plus, he has fought people who he can't sense the ki of, so ki sensing wouldn't necessarily get him around the holographic illusions that the nanite would give him. So, in conclusion, while Goku can obviously win in a random encounter, leveling the playing field in either way, both in giving Batman time to formulate a plan, or in making it so their stats are equal, there's no beating the Batman. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you disagree with my takes, let me know how I was wrong in the comments down below. See ya!